Hello and welcome to Zwalen Custom Guitars. My name is Ben and this is my final submission video for the Great Guitar Build of 2021. So this is my guitar. This is the Geode. The theme of the build was that I wanted to make a guitar that rocks. But the idea behind it is that on the back of the guitar, it's the outside of the Geode, looking fairly plain with the kind of hints of something interesting going on inside. And when you flip it over, you see this amazing top that almost shows this kind of cavernous living organism that the Geode is actually alive in some way. And it really does come alive with this top. It is absolutely lovely. So with that said, that's the theme. Let's get to the build and the demo at the end. Thanks for watching. So I started my build by working on the neck of my guitar. It was a multi-laminate neck made up of, first of all, walnut, then veneer, then maple, another veneer, another walnut, another veneer, another maple, another veneer, and walnut. I then took it to the bandsaw and cut off the headstock angle, and then got my hand plane to smooth it out. I love watching the wood change color as it gets smooth like that. Then I got my Marathi router and routed out the truss rod channel. Once that was done, I took it back to the bandsaw and cut off all the excess on the back of the neck. I then took it to my handmade router table to do some shaping of the neck using the MDF templates I'd made. And I then did the same thing with the headstock, just the initial shaping, as I do need to bring it back to the router table once I've glued on the extra side wings on the headstock. And that's what you see me doing here. We do this to get a little bit of extra width on the headstock as it sticks out further than the neck. Clampy, clampy. And I'll bring it back to the router table and just finish up the shape of the neck. Love the look of concentration on my face. Priceless. So working on the fretboard now. This is a Zero-Coty fretboard. I'm just about to glue on to the neck itself. I'm putting in the bits of tape there to prevent the truss rod from rattling around, and then attaching many clamps. After I'd pre-scored the fret slots which I'd used a knife to do, I'm now using a saw just to cut those to depth. And then I moved on to putting on the binding on the fretboard. This is the same red mani that I'm going to be using in the body. And just using some tape to attach it. I didn't need to use any clamps for this. So in the fretboard, to do the inlays, I used the brass tubing, which I then filed in some teeth, put it into my drill, and used my sanding block, my radius sanding block, as a guide to drill the perfect circle inlays into the fretboard. It worked really well. I don't know how I dreamt this up, but it worked brilliantly, and the end result turned out to be awesome. Like, even I was surprised when I looked at it. I'm like, hey, it worked. So there you go, that looks great. Not going to show all the footage of doing all of them because it did take some time to get it all done. But yeah, they all came out perfectly. And then just use some super glue to whack those in there. I think I don't have the footage of filing them down, but they came out nice and smooth. I then moved on to shaping the back of the neck. This is something I've always done by hand. I use the Iwasaki files, and I use a Shinto rasp as well as a spoke shave. Always seems to work for me, and I'm going to keep doing it this way until I fail at some point and pick a different technique, but I like to freehand it. I then worked on the faceplate for the headstock. This is a piece of red mallee again, and I'm just sanding down to shape. I then used a coping saw to cut out the logo in the headstock. A couple of mishaps where a few pieces broke off. It's quite brittle, this wood, with being that it's a burl. So a bit of super glue fixes up all mistakes. I'm now busy attaching the faceplate to the headstock. I've got a couple of guiding pins there just to help keep the faceplate exactly in the right place. And more clamps. You can never have too many of them. I then use some PVA glue, and this is now the silver leaf going in to make the nice sparkly inlaid top, logo. I'm now using some epoxy resin, which I then sand over later. So this is the kind of main top for the guitar. This is a piece of burled red mallee from Australia. I got it from a guy called John Ambler from Luthier Wood Supply UK. Definitely check out his website, luthierwood.com. He supplies to the UK and I think most of Europe as well. Incredible woods. He's always got the most incredible deals. Highly recommend checking him out. So yeah, thanks for this amazing wood, John. Then moved on to the body. This is the piece of, it's a 3-piece alder body which I glued up, and I'm now busy working on inlaying the red mallee into the top. This was a really lengthy process, very fiddly. It took me forever to get this inlaid. Yeah, this is the only aggressive part was with the router to do the majority of the inner bits, but then I move on to doing the more fine work where I used chisels and little router plane and the surgical knife to try and get that done. You can see a little extra hole there. That's not on purpose. That was my router. My router, I hadn't set the depth stop properly, and I just kind of kept going, sinking the bit lower and lower, and I thought, hey, this is weird. Anyway, there's an extra hole. Luckily I was able to hide it, and it wouldn't even know it's there. So then flooded the whole thing with Titebond, ready to set the top inside, which I then did, and clamped it all down and smoothed it out with a sander. Now I'm working on the neck pocket, so using the Forstner bit just to clear most of the material out. And then finish the job with the router. And then cut out the pickup cavities using this 3D printed template, which ended up melting a little bit, but didn't cause any problems. And then rounded over the edges of the body. And using the pillar drill, I removed the majority of the material for the control cavity. So the configuration for this guitar is 1 volume, 1 tone, and a 3-way pickup switch. So just drilling those holes. I then use the same technique to inlay the control cavity cover on the back of the guitar, and use the tiniest little router plane you've ever seen to finish that up nicely. I then use a little small V-gouge to carve out the little veins in the neck, in the body. This was really quite fun. I've never done this before, and got my creative juices flowing to make this look as natural as I could. Again, trying to get that theme of having this geode with the veins of silver, gold, and copper running through the rock. So this is where I start filling in exactly that with silver leaf, gold leaf, and copper leaf. Started off with some PVA wood glue, just to really give it something to bond to in the meantime. And this took a whole long time. This was a really big effort, but it was made a little bit more interesting with having my son there strapped to me. He really didn't help all that much. He just sort of drooled and then fell asleep at one point. But it was lovely to have him there while he was awake. So hi Luca, thanks for the help. And once that was done, I flooded it with epoxy resin. This was more interesting than I expected, purely because it just ran everywhere. So I had to do this in multiple passes to get it flooded properly. But once it was all sanded out, it looked really, really cool. So then I really wanted the red mallee to stand out, to be this very deep red color. So that's why I've used the Crimson Guitar Stunning Stain, just to give it an extra depth of red, because I want it to be as bold as possible. It then looks like I ruined the guitar by putting all this color on the back, but this was the whole point of the Geode, is I wanted to have this these like hints of colors showing through the back of the body, and that's what this initial base is for. I'm now using the acrylic paint, black and burnt umber, and kind of dabbing it on to try and get this kind of textured finish on the guitar, like a rock. And you're just able to see some of those colors showing through. It's very subtle, but it's exactly what I wanted. I didn't want it to be too bold. I did the same around the side, just masking off the edges. This was hugely satisfying, using the back of a chisel just to scrape off all the excess acrylic paint from the resin. It looks so cool. Fun to do. And then drilled out the headstock to put in the tuners, back and front, so that you don't get any tear out as it pulls through. And then I worked on the side dots. I just used some small brass rod just to do this little side dots. And they came out great, all nicely aligned. I then stained the headstock plate as well, because that needs to match the body. And I did exactly the same thing for the binding on the fretboard, both on the front and on the sides. And then it was on to doing the fretwork. Now I'm time-lapsing this as fast as I can, because fretwork, as far as I'm concerned, is boring. But it has to be done, and yeah, I think it turned out really well in the end. It's nice and smooth, and great success all around. I glued the neck into the body. That all went smoothly, bit of squeeze out there, no problem. I then drilled all the holes in the body, the string ferrules there, and then moved on to finishing the guitar. So I used a nitrocellulose lacquer from a spray can. And I don't have a lot of footage of this, mainly because the lighting in my workshop is not great, so it didn't really show a hell of a lot in terms of the impact of doing this. Also, I didn't want to get my camera covered in spray, so there's not much footage. There you go. That looks quite good, I'd say. So I did several coats of this over several days when the weather was good. Good grief, my workshop is messy. I'll get right on that, I promise. So over several days, and then I had to leave it for, I left it for a week then to cure before I moved on to the next stages. So here I'm busy putting on some oil on the fretboard to give it some protection, and then worked on sanding the neck. So the idea was I wanted the neck to be smooth so that it was good for playability. So I'm doing a wet and dry sand with some water from a spray bottle to get that nice and smooth, and then that was polished off. And then for the body, the idea was I didn't want to do the flattening of it with the sandpaper. I just polished it, and the idea was I wanted it to be a rough textured finish, because that really fits well with the theme of the Geode. And then it was time to start fitting hardware. So the bridge has been set. I'm now putting in the string ferrules. Back and front was the first time I'd done string ferrules, so I was surprised they turned out so well. I then worked on fitting the tuners to the headstock, and then started fiddling with the nut. So this just needed to be measured out to get the strings nicely spaced. I then did these sort of initial cuts and then filed them down just to get the initial height. They'll need to be adjusted later. And then worked on the wiring, everybody's favorite. I actually don't mind wiring, it's quite interesting to me. This was a pretty straightforward wiring. It was purely a volume tone with a 3-way select switch. Nice and simple. And then it was on to the final setup. Get the strings on. You can see me stringing up the guitar here. I put my safety glasses on just in case. And then there was final intonation and working on the action, which is where you see me filing down the nut. And that's my build.